Craig Goldenfarb. He is a personal injury attorney and law firm owner in South Florida. And he's also, in addition to running his law firm, Gold Law, he is also the founder and CEO of the Seven Figure Attorney Summit. Oh, is he here? Hey, wow, there he is. Craig, how are you? Good to see you. Are you on mute? Let me ask you to unmute. And I think I might need to also make you, allow you to share your screen. But first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you if you can hear me.
Craig, thank you so much for being here.
Sure, my pleasure.
All right. Well, hey, I know we talked a little bit before this today. You are a personal injury attorney. You're also in a, you might say, a mentorship role to other attorneys who are growing and creating more profitable practices. But, you know, I wanted to kind of start this conversation, just if you want to share, give the people a sense of, you know, who you are and how you found yourself doing what you do today. And then we'll kind of get into the main topic of discussion, which I know for you is a lot about data and using that to get yourself and your law firm where you want to go. So please, anything you want to share?
Great. So I am going to share screen. And just I have a couple slides and I will talk over the slides. So can you see my slide? Am I sharing?
Looks very good.
Correctly? Great. All right. So does it say who am I? Am I sharing the right thing?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So who am I? So I am, let's see, I got to make sure I can, there you go. So I'm the founder and CEO of a trade named law firm in Florida for the last 22 years. It's called Gold Law, and that's part of my name, Craig Goldenfarb. I have 2 offices, 12 attorneys, and I've grown from 1 employee all the way to 80 staff members in about 20 years. My current role, you know, I love helping the community and starting charities. So my position with my law firm and other businesses has allowed me to become what I call a philanthropreneur, which is a guy who starts a lot of businesses to be able to give back to the community. And that's kind of who I am as a person. I have a couple of charities. I'm the board member of several other charity boards, and that's really why I have so many businesses, including my law firm. I run my personal injury law office based on a real corporate structure, accountability, and KPIs, which are also known as metrics, under a system called EOS. I'm sure that some of the attendees have read the book Traction and are operating under an entrepreneurial operating system, which is EOS. It's a nationwide accountability structure for all kinds of industries. And I operate my law firm under an EOS platform. So that's who I am. And I've had my own firm for about 23 years. And I was a plaintiff's personal injury attorney for the first 6 years before that in Miami. Now I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Love it. Now, I mean, when we first met, it was at an event. And one of the things I learned about you first was that it sounds like you did not get to where you are with your practice by staying, you know, in your little circle. You kind of went out and you, you know, connected with other attorneys and, you know, maybe learn from them and then help, you know, bring that same ethos to, you know, what you do now with Seven Figure Summit. I know a lot of that conference is based on, I'm not going to hopefully give too much away here, but by the numbers, right? How you're using numbers, metrics, data, and I guess KPIs to help find where those gaps are in your process and where you can, whether that's a personnel issue, whether that's like a process issue, start to fill in the gaps. And so, I mean, if you are able to share, you know, what was that process like when you first started? What KPIs were you focused on in the beginning? And then how has that changed over time?
Well, when I was about 5 years into my law career, well, first of all, I got lucky. I got out of law school and I got hired by a man who ran a personal injury firm in Miami, who gave me what I call a dual education. He taught me how to treat your law firm like a business. And he also taught me and gave me to his trial lawyers to become a trial lawyer. And over the next 5 years, I saw that I had both skill sets. I could be a trial lawyer, and I had some business skill sets that I was developing. And I was lucky enough to have a mentor who was teaching me both. So I called it like there's a joint degree. It's almost like getting your JD MBA back in law school, which some of us did and some of us didn't. So for 5 years, I learned how to be a trial lawyer, and he took me along to his TV shoots and his billboard shoots and all this stuff to teach me how to run a company. And after 5 years, I realized that I wanted to be like him and that I wanted to be mostly an entrepreneur. But what I quickly realized was that there's a whole gamut when you're an attorney. You can be 100% entrepreneur, 100% trial lawyer, or anywhere in between. And you don't have to be on one side or the other. I decided to be 100% entrepreneur 15 years ago. I have not touched a case in 15 years. Now, you don't have to be that. And you don't even have to be that to be successful. But you've got to look at the entire spectrum of 100% lawyer versus 100% entrepreneur and figure out where you want to be on that line. And then do everything you can to place yourself in your happy place on that line. So that was the mental analysis I did between ages 25 and 30, 25 being when I got to law school, and age 30 when I started to figure out that they were different skill sets. So that was the process of how that happened. And anybody who's on this call knows that they're different skill sets, being a business person running a business and being a trial lawyer. So that's where it started. And then since I realized I wanted to become a business person, I realized I had to act like a business person. And when you act like a business person, it's doing things like measuring numbers, metrics, budgeting, looking at your profit and loss, actually having an accountant, looking at your balance sheet, learning what these things are is being a businessman. So if you're unwilling to do that, then that's okay. You should be a lawyer. And if you want to grow, you're going to have to hire someone to do that if you want to grow. So to the lawyers who have 3 to 5 staff, you're going to be stuck at 3 to 5 staff, maybe as much as 7 or 8 staff forever, unless you figure out how to hire around yourself some people who can do these businessy type stuff. So that was the genesis of starting to go down the path of metrics and KPIs.
Okay. All right. That helps me understand. And, you mentioned if you want to take the entrepreneurial route, you're going to need an accountant, you're going to need a team. I don't know if we talked about this beforehand, but what would you say is like the first hire that you need to make as a law firm owner if you want to cross that gap from just being a lawyer to being a business owner?
The first one is that you need to realize that hiring non-legal staff is not a waste of money. In fact, it's as good or better an investment as hiring legal staff. So I hired my first, what I called an office manager at 6 staff, 6. And everybody's like, wow, that's pretty early. And I say, no, because I realized at 5 staff, 5, that I was dealing with the phone calls, hey boss, I'm going to be late to work. Or hey boss, can you approve a vacation? Or hey boss, I'm sick today because my kid has blah, blah, blah. And after you're about 4 or 5 staff, you should not be handling that stuff. You should not be handling a broken copier. You should not be opening the mail. You should not be answering the phone. You should not be, there's so many you should not be that started about 4 staff. And once I realized that I was doing those low-level tasks, I realized, hey, I need a non-legal employee. So the first one I hired was at 6 staff. And at that point, it was an office manager. And I realized that it was almost like a ratio. For every maybe 2 legal staff I hired another 1 non-legal staff. And that was an interesting ratio that continues to today. I have 80 staff and over 30 of them are non-legal. Over 30 of them are non-legal. That's a lot because I have a business and a business needs to have non-legal staff.
I see. I mean, it sounds like when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking more about like process. And when you're talking about KPIs, numbers, making sure that your processes are dialed in. But when I listen to you, it sounds like the, human resource element is like the more important piece to figure out. So I'm curious, when you're looking at data, metrics, and KPIs, and you're thinking about like staff to make sure that you are getting the results that you need from your team, what does that look like? What are some of those metrics, or how do you think about it?
Sure. Well, we can now transfer to legal, which is where many of my KPIs are. Now I have KPIs and metrics for every single employee at every single department. But what I did is, one of the questions you were going to ask me is just to give a quick example of why KPIs matter. So let me do that first. So I have hundreds of hundreds of KPIs. But if I want to take one that had a major impact, can you see my screen? One special KPI, is it showing to the
Yes,
folks?
yes.
Great. So one KPI, why does it matter? Why should you measure anything? So 9 years ago, I realized my average fee per case in an auto case, a car accident, was 40% lower than my average fee in a premises case. That's a slip and fall. Now, I guess if I were in a room lecturing to your folks, that they would go, oh, that's surprising, because we think maybe we like car accident cases better than slip and falls. And I'm in Florida and the law is pretty decent. And once I measured this as a KPI, which is where do I earn more money? What practice area? I was shocked. So I was like, slip and falls make me more money. Okay, so that's a KPI. It's one thing I measured. And as a result, I went out and bought more billboards for slip and falls. And I filmed some more slip and fall TV commercials, while other lawyers, maybe in your jurisdiction, whoever's listening, may be advertising only for car accidents. If you think about all the billboards or TV commercials, they're car accident ads. What did I do? I did the opposite. Why? It was based on a metric. Other lawyers made fun of me. He's the slip and fall guy. I laughed all the way to the bank because I was making more money. So that's just one real life example when people say, who's this geek who's measuring metrics and KPIs? Well, that's a real life example of just one that mattered. So that's a good example. So let me tell you, and that was my billboard for the slip and falls that made me, I would say, multiple millions of dollars, because I measured one KPI, just one. This is one. Mm-hmm. So that's my example of why KPIs matter. So my top KPIs for 4 departments, and I'm not going to go over them in too much detail, but you asked me to say some examples of what my KPIs are. So I do it by departments. I have departments in my law firm. In intake and marketing, and if when I'm done, guys, whoever's watching this or listening, you take a picture of this, I have no objection. So wait till all these are done and then get out your cell phone. Maybe take a picture of the 20 or 30 KPIs I'm going to list, because I made this slide for the most important ones for me. So intake and marketing, total leads. That means the total phone calls you get. How many of them are qualified? In other words, of the total phone calls you get, how many of those cases do you want? And I know from industry standard that it should be about 40% if you're advertising correctly. 40% of your calls should be ones that you want. And then cases signed up this year. Do you know how many cases you signed up this year? We do it per month, per week, per year. And then we have goals for all these. And then your effective conversion rate, which means how many of the qualified leads did you actually sign up? In sales, they call that your closing rate or your closing ratio. How many of the products that you wanted to sell did you sell? Well, if they're qualified and you wanted them, how many did you convert? We have an internal goal of 94.7% conversion rate. That's a lot. 94.7% is our conversion rate, our effective conversion rate goal. So those are 4 basic intake and marketing KPIs that I find to be tremendously important. If you're in pre-suit, this is just your pre-suit department. Total number of cases per practice area. In other words, I'm 63% auto and about 26% slip and fall. And then the rest are medical malpractice, et cetera. Do you know these numbers for your firm? Do you know what percent in each practice area you have? I know them by heart because that's all I study all day. So do you know how many cases you have in each practice area and which practice area is most profitable? And then the phase of each case, that shows your workflow. How many cases do you have where the client is still treating with the doctors? How many cases do you have that are being negotiated? How many cases do you have that are settled? If you don't know the phase of each case, then you're not controlling your workflow. Those are a couple in pre-suit. Then we go to litigation. How many lawsuits do you file? How many have you filed? We have goals for each litigation attorney and metrics that control all of that. And then we reward or penalize based on whether they're reaching their numbers. Total number of cases in litigation per litigation attorney. We have a goal. We have our lawyers in litigation only handle 35 cases, maybe 40 at most, because those are litigation cases, and our litigation attorneys do not handle pre-suit cases. So that's a metric. How many cases does each lawyer have? Are your cases set for mediation? And if they're not, why not? That's a metric. How many cases are on a trial docket? How many cases are not on a trial docket? If not, why not? So those are 4 basic litigation metrics. And then you get to the money. I call this the money department. Your settled cases. How many cases have you settled where you haven't taken the fee yet? Well, that's sold product where you haven't been paid yet from a sales perspective. The case is done, but you haven't taken your fee. How about cases where you settled and you took your fee, but there's that Medicare lien remaining or some remaining doctor issue, and you're not able to put it in the closet, not able to archive it yet? And then your pre-suit receivables due. Again, how much money do you have sitting where you haven't taken the fee yet, but the case was settled? Same thing with litigation, receivables. So during COVID, when COVID hit, these were the two metrics I was looking at every day because those were cases that were settled, but I hadn't taken the fee yet. And I had to make payroll, just like the rest of you during COVID. So these two metrics were super important because that was sold product where we weren't paid yet. The case was settled, but we hadn't taken a fee. So I call those receivables. And then your average fee per case. If you don't know what your average fee per case, that's like selling sneakers and not knowing how much profit you make on each pair of sneakers. I can't tell you any businessman who doesn't know how much profit they make on each product. Any good businessman. If you're a lawyer and you're providing a professional service, shouldn't you know how much your average case earns you, whether it's in pre-suit or lit? So those are 4, 6, 10, that's 16 metrics. I have probably a couple hundred that I measure. But you asked me to put together, my most important metrics. This is the point at which you get out your cell phones, guys. And if you want to know my 16 top metrics, if you don't come to my seminar, because I'm going to go over these again in a lot more detail. But these are the 16 metrics that I find you must know as a business owner, as a personal injury firm. So, and then the last one is the fees year to date from referred out cases. So if you refer cases out, how much money are you making on those? And do you have goals and a way of tracking those? So that is about, 17 metrics that I measure. I know that was a long answer, but you asked me to talk about my favorite metrics. Those 17 right there. If I know that, I can be on vacation, look at those numbers. I can be on vacation for a month and figure out how my case is going, how my firm is going. So long answer, short question, but that's it.
This looks like a blueprint. I know you're going to give more along these lines at the event that's coming up that I want to ask you about. But here's the thing. I'm looking at this list, and this is not a question I, sent you before, but I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking, you go into the average, forget law firm, the average business, and it's going to be very different in terms of what someone might, where they are now versus understanding the numbers to the, and it's my sense that it takes a level of accountability, a level of commitment and team culture to make this even possible. And so, one of the things that I, asked you before was like about, how do KPIs help you maintain great client service? But before we even get to that, how are you helping your team commit and stick to these numbers? And what does the culture of your law firm look like so that this is even possible?
Well, the only way to get people to care about things is to measure them and put something behind it. And by something behind it, I mean not only our culture, but money. So every single one of these is tied to bonuses, and I call them incentives. So whether it's a lawyer or my receptionist, every single employee, all 80, have KPI and money that is given to them based on hitting some of these numbers. And we have even determined KPIs and incentives for our receptionist, our office services manager, people who are non-legal, because we know that we want to drive them towards activities that keep this business going. So to me, first you have to create these and measure these, and then you have to let your culture support the measurement of these. And if they don't want to be measured, they should not be worked here. They should not work at my company, because the whole point of my company is accountability. But not only are we going to hold you accountable, but we're going to reward you if you get to the goals that we've set. So everyone at my office has KPIs, and they get a quarterly or annual, depending on their job position, reward of money based on getting these numbers. So it's a culture of accountability. They hold each other accountable, just like athletes on a team. If somebody's not playing defense, everybody's yelling at them, right? Because we succeed as a team. So in our office, if one person is not holding up their end of the bargain and not making their numbers, everybody's all over their butt, because we have group rewards and we have individual rewards. It's kind of like a basketball team. If you lose as a team. And you might win the MVP, but you might lose the championship. So we want to encourage both at our company. So our culture is wrapped up in numbers and accountability.
I see. And I guess it's pretty natural if the team knows the numbers, they know the target, they know where they are, as long as they're reaching that, or maybe even striving, then the client service side of the business, the client experience, I mean, does that kind of take care of itself, or how
No.
do you feel about that relationship?
Well, it's interesting because we thought about that. How do we make sure the customer experience is good? So we have KPIs based on customer experience. So we have certain amounts of client communication that must occur. So if you have to talk to the client once a week, that's a KPI. If that's trackable within your case management system, that's a KPI. So if we do a printout and we see employee A is not having any client communication, we know that the customer service is bad. So there are metrics wrapped around client service. For example, the contact frequency is one. Again, time on desk. Like, how long does it take you to settle a case that settles in pre-suit? I know at my law firm it's 9.5 months. Now, if the case goes to litigation, it's more like 16 months from beginning to end, and that's because we measure it. So that's part of client service, right? Is how long it takes their case to be done. So if we make sure that we keep them to those metrics, then that wraps into customer service. So we have KPIs that are involving and wrapping customer service, such as time on desk or client communication. Those are all KPIs, but they're involved in customer service.
I see. I see. You mentioned there's like 100, so I know there's a lot more that we're not going to get into right now. All right. So I guess when I first heard you talk about something like this, you mentioned that, Filevine was your case management system and that the data there was good. Honestly, I'm not sure if you're still on Filevine, but
I am.
whatever tool that you're using, how are you? Two things, right? How is that tool specifically like helping? Is it helping you track all data points in one tool, or are some of these tracked manually? And then the follow-up question to that is, looking forward to this new, age of AI and more automation, what of those trends are you looking to either have you started using, or you're looking forward to start using as you continue?
Sure. Well, in my opinion, there are a few. So I actually have a slide. How do I keep track of my KPIs? The answer is my case management system. So in my opinion, and I endorse Filevine because I love Filevine, but having demoed many and spoken at many conferences, my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is that Litify, Filevine, and Smart Advocate are probably the three platforms that probably are leading in the PI space right now, those three. And that's because of their reporting abilities. Smart Advocate and Litify do them within their internal software system, and Filevine has a separate adjunct software called Periscope, where you measure all your KPIs. And all of the systems grab from all data points in your system, and then you can create the reports. So let me show you what it looks like in Filevine. So that was last year. So last year, this is Periscope, a card from Periscope, where the report I created was the cases signed up year to date by referral source. So this is a great example of a wonderful KPI. How many cases did you sign up in 2023? The answer was 887. Now, this particular report I designed in Periscope, which is part of Filevine, that I wanted it broken down by referral source. So I can easily go to find that I got non-gold law attorneys, which means referred by lawyers outside of my firm, was 31% of my business last year, almost 32%. So that was my highest referral source. And I am a TV and billboard lawyer, yet I market personally so much by speaking, lecturing, seminars, that a lot of my business, 32%, comes from lawyers. So this is a great example of one of my cards, they call it, within my data management system, where I know exactly how many cases I signed up last year and exactly where they came from. See this pie chart. So this is just a brilliant visual example of me knowing exactly where I got my product being my cases. So, a certain amount from TV, certain amount from Google Verified, certain amount from billboards, etc. So this is one of about 150 cards I have in my Periscope environment. So, another example, I talked about phases. So at one point I had pre-suit cases, I had 579, and I wanted to know which lawyers had them. And you can see at that point I had 2 pre-suit lawyers and how many files they had each. So this is, again, a screen grab from Periscope showing exactly a data point I wanted to know, which is how many cases do I have in pre-suit? Well, it was 579. And how many did each lawyer have? Well, my 2 main lawyers in pre-suit had 283 and 233. So that answers the question of how do you keep track? The answer is it should be in your case management system. If you're doing it in outside sources, you're going to have fractured data. And I don't like fractured data. I want data all in one unified place. And if you have Litify, Smart Advocate, Filevine, there may be others that can do that. Those are the three that I know of that I think are the best, but it should all be in one place. We do not use Excel spreadsheets for a lot of stuff. We do for some, but for data like this, most data is in my Periscope system, which is my case management system. And the second part of your question was, what am I looking forward to? A lot of these systems are developing AI methods of measuring the data. In other words, analysis of this data. I don't use AI for demand letters yet. I use it for data analysis. And some of these companies, Filevine, Litify, Smart Advocate, and others, are using it to help analyze the data that you draw. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, I mean, seeing this, I know it's a small piece. It's like a snapshot of something much bigger. And I know we're coming up at the end here. I wanted to ask you to share with the audience a little bit about the upcoming event with Seven Figure Attorney Summit. I know it's going to be next month in April, and I don't think it's too late to get tickets. But, when I went last year, I learned so much just about what it's like. I felt like the sausage in the factory. What do they call that? Seeing how the sausage is made.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Anyway, not to spoil the surprise, but if there's anything you want to share about that, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. It's a one-day seminar. I've given it for about 6, 7, 8 years. And I'm really transparent about how I run my firm and all my numbers, as you could see on the last slide. I share there are some lawyers bigger than me, some lawyers smaller than me, but I really enjoy helping others. I really do. So I share a lot of numbers. I share a lot of techniques and strategies. It's a one-day seminar in Boston this year. We change the city every year. It's on a Thursday. There's the website here on the screen. There are only 4 speakers. It's not a lot of speakers because it's one day. I'm the main speaker. I talk about employee compensation, incentives, metrics, KPIs, and a lot of topics that will help any size PI firm. It is mostly for PI firms. And then the other speaker is my chief of culture, who also talks about culture and HR, hiring, firing, the platform we use for HR. And she's amazing. And I hired her from Disney World. So if there's some person you could hire as an office manager or HR from Disney World, that's a pretty good hire because she knows everything from the Disney Institute, which trains in HR. And then the third speaker is my chief marketing officer, who runs my multi-million-dollar marketing budget with a very big staff. So he's a speaker. And then this year we're having a very special speaker on work-life balance. And she happens to be my wife, because she's going to get up there and tell how it is really to be married to a ridiculous entrepreneur who works too hard. So I'm looking forward to and scared to hear what my wife is going to say. So those are the 4 speakers on April 11th. There are some spots left, so go to that website. Probably 100 or 200 firms will be there, and I look forward to seeing you there.
I love it. Craig, also, we're going to be there, the Intaker team. And so if you're on this call and you want to come meet us in person, then also the 7 Figure Attorney Summit is the place to do it. Anyway, Craig, I want to thank you for your time, for being here and, being part of Product Lab Day. So we'll see you in Boston, my friend.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure.